Race and ethnicity affecting trauma survivors and their relationships. Racial and ethnic identity and trauma. Racial and ethnic identity shape how people experience, respond to, and recover from traumatic events. Race-based traumatic stress. The emotional injury caused by experiences of racism, discrimination, and race-related stressors can produce symptoms similar to other forms of trauma, including intrusive memories, hypervigilance, and avoidance. These responses are layered on top of any other traumatic experiences a person has had, changing how they perceive threat, safety, and trust. How race and ethnicity change the trauma landscape. Trauma can be chronic and cumulative. Repeated experiences of discrimination or microaggressions produce ongoing stress that functions like repeated trauma rather than a single event. Prevalence varies by group. Studies show lifetime trauma exposure and PTSD prevalence differ across racial and ethnic groups, with some minoritized communities experiencing higher rates of certain traumas and PTSD symptoms. Cultural meaning matters. Cultural histories, community narratives, and collective memories influence whether, how, and when an experience is labeled traumatic, which in turn affects seeking help and coping strategies. Why relationships are especially vulnerable. Trust, intimacy, and emotional safety are the foundations of dating, romantic, and even new platonic connections, and those foundations are precisely what trauma can undermine. Trauma responses that often surface in early relationship stages include flashbacks, dissociation, hypervigilance, emotional numbing, and misreading social cues. When trauma is entangled with race or ethnicity, these reactions are often compounded by concerns about being misunderstood, stereotyped, or dismissed because of identity. Research into racial trauma highlights how race-related stressors can affect mental and physical health, and how they may present in interpersonal contexts. First impressions are filtered by safety checks. Survivors may unconsciously evaluate potential partners for signs of threat related to past race-based harms, which can look like guardedness or seeming aloofness to a new person. Misinterpretation can cause conflict. A defensive reaction rooted in past racialized harm can be read by someone without that history as overreacting, emotional distance, or lack of interest, which fuels miscommunication and hurt on both sides. Microaggressions trigger trauma responses. Comments intended as small slights can rekindle traumatic stress and lead to sudden withdrawal or strong emotional reactions that a new partner may not understand. Common trauma-driven adaptations and how they show up with new people. Flashbacks and intrusive memories can cause sudden, vivid reliving of past racialized or other traumas that derails a conversation or date. Dissociation can feel like being disconnected, blank, or not present, which may appear as disengagement. Hypervigilance involves constant scanning for threat, making it hard to relax and potentially coming off as suspicious. Emotional constriction or volatility may show as shutting down or unexpectedly erupting in anger, grief, or panic. Avoidant behaviors include canceling plans, keeping intimacy shallow, or refusing to talk about certain topics. Each of these is an adaptive attempt to survive past harm, not a moral failing or a fixed character flaw. Barriers to care and recognition. Minority trauma survivors often face structural and cultural barriers to effective treatment. Underdiagnosis, lack of culturally competent providers, stigma within communities, and therapies that don't address race-based stress specifically. These gaps mean survivors may carry unresolved race-linked wounds into relationships without a clear pathway to healing or partners who understand the context. Practical guidance for partners and new people. Assume good intent and prioritize humility. Start from curiosity and a willingness to learn rather than from defensiveness. Small, consistent acts of respect build safety. Name and normalize reactions without minimizing. If a partner withdraws or dissociates, an anchoring comment like, "I notice you seem far away. Do you want space or would you like me to stay with you?" can help. Avoid pressuring disclosure. Let survivors control when and how much they share about race-linked trauma, because pressuring for details can re-traumatize. Learn about racial trauma and microaggressions. Educate yourself so you can distinguish between reactions rooted in trauma and unrelated relationship issues. Validate feelings, don't fix them. Validation of emotion and experience reduces isolation and increases trust. Practical help comes later. First, listen and acknowledge. Practical guidance for survivors. Name your triggers and signals. Keep a short list you can share if you want. For example, I go quiet when I feel judged. A moment of patience helps me come back. Use pre-agreed safety words or plans. If you dissociate or feel flooded, a brief signal, text or phrase, agreed in advance allows the other person to respond constructively. Seek culturally competent support. Therapists who understand racial trauma and cultural context are more likely to validate your experience and offer relevant tools. Practice small exposure with trusted people. Gradually allow intimacy in ways you can tolerate and celebrate incremental steps toward safety. Document and reflect. Write about interactions that felt unsafe or healing so patterns become clearer and easier to address. System-level steps and community healing. Healing racial trauma requires both individual-level care and system-level change. Increased access to culturally informed mental health services, clinician training in race-based stress, community support networks, and public recognition that racism is a health issue. When communities and institutions acknowledge racial trauma, survivors gain more pathways to repair and relationships can be rebuilt on firmer ground. Conclusion. Race and ethnicity profoundly shape how trauma is experienced and expressed in relationships. Understanding that protective reactions, including flashbacks, dissociation, avoidance, and hypervigilance, often come from a history of racialized harm reframes difficult interactions as the work of survival, not personal rejection. Partners and new acquaintances who learn, listen, and move with humility create the conditions where safety, trust, and intimacy can slowly grow. Professional help that recognizes and treats race-based trauma speeds recovery and makes relational repair possible.